Hello and welcome to another video of IELTS Master. For today's video, we are preparing a reading and I would be providing you the link from which you can practice the same reading. This reading will be also having its answers in that link, so it will be easier for you to practice from there. Now if you want to go ahead and practice a reading first, you can do that right now. If not, and you want to follow with the explanation of the passage before jumping into the question, you can do that too. But if you're trying to practice the reading, you can go ahead, take your time, and then you can come back for today's explanation video. It will be only the section 1. So only the first set of questions that we will be seeing in the reading will be done by us, not the whole reading. But I will be providing the next two parts in the next videos so that you can also practice the whole reading and follow up with the explanation. And for the writing, we have already provided a video for the writing task 2, like the grammatical range and accuracy. It is also in the task 1. So I will be creating another video for that and I will be uploading that soon. With that being said, let's start today's video. Before we start the explanation, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you're new here. You can also share the video if your friends are preparing for IELTS. And if you want, you can also hit that bell button for getting all the notifications. So let's start with the explanation. Section 1. Origin of species and continent formation. A. The fact that there was once a Pangaean supercontinent, a Panthalassa Ocean, and a Tethys Ocean has profound implications for the evolution of multicellular life on Earth. So, about Pangaean subcontinent, those of you who have studied geography, you have seen that way before, like millions and millions of years back, all the continents that we currently have was just one, like it was fused into one supercontinent named Pangaea, and then with the help of tectonic plate movement, it all got separated, and now what we have is what we have. But every single continent was a part of the Pangaean supercontinent. These considerations were unknown to the scientists of 19th century, making their scientific deductions even more remarkable. Quite independently of each other, Charles Darwin and his young contemporary, Alfred Russel Wallace, reached the conclusion that life has evolved by natural selection. So, quite independently means Charles Darwin had no clue that somebody named Alfred Russel Wallace was researching on a paper on which he was also interested in. And same for Alfred Russel Wallace, he had no clue that Charles Darwin was researching on the same topic that he had opted for. Wallace later wrote in My Life of his own inspiration. B. Why do some species die and some live? The answer was clearly that on the whole, the best fitted lived. So, the answer for the question that was arised, it is whoever is best, whoever has all the qualities and they can live in different kind of environment, they will be living from the effects of disease. The most healthy escape, yeah, we say if you are healthy you won't be catching any disease or you will be fighting against a disease. So that's what it was said here. From enemies, the strongest, the swiftest, or the most cunning. So from the enemies, whoever is strongest will be winning, whoever is swiftest will be running and hiding, And the most cunning, like most cunning means one who has his or her intelligence way higher than other animals. He will be escaping, or he will be even camouflaging. He will be kind of blending within the environment. So he would be trying to cheat the predator, and he will be saving his life. From famine, the best hunters. So, from famine means whenever there is a lack of food, whoever is a hunter, and not only a hunter, they are best in their field, they will be winning. Then it suddenly flashed on me that this self acting process would improve the race. So, this is something that is said by Wallace, and he says that after thinking for all those points, something came into his mind that the self acting process would be improving the human race. Because in every generation, the inferior would inevitably be killed off and the superior would remain, that is, the fittest would survive. So, and then he concluded that in every generation, inferior, who is weak, will be dying soon. Like, inevitably means he will be. There is no alternative explanation or no alternative way of making that inferior survive. And again, the superior would remain, so the superior would win. And then he said, fittest would survive. Whoever is fit will be thriving and surviving. See, both Darwin's and Wallace's ideas about natural selection had been influenced by the essays of Thomas Malthus in his Principles of Population. So, both ideas for Darwin and Wallace were to some extent inspired by this book, Principles of Population, written by Thomas Malthus. Their conclusions, however, had been the direct result of their personal observation of animals and plants in widely separated geographic locations. So, the conclusions that they are arriving to for both Darwin and Wallace. So, Darwin and Wallace, whatever they are saying as their conclusions, are actually they were observed from animals and plants before giving them that straightforward lines. Darwin, from his experiences during the voyage of the Beagle, and particularly during the ship's visit to the Galapagos Islands in the East Pacific in 1835, Wallace, during his years of travel in the Amazon basin and in the Indonesia Australian archipelago in the 1850s. So when did they observe the plants and animals? It is during this time frame. So next, the D, para. D. Darwin had been documenting his ideas on natural selection for many years when he received a paper of this self same subject from Wallace, who asked for Darwin's opinion and help in getting it published. So, yeah, whenever like you are doing some research on something or you are thinking about something and some friend of yours are having the exact idea and they're coming up to you and they're saying, what do you think about this? Don't you get surprised? So, yeah, Darwin had the same moment, and it is said that Darwin had been documenting his ideas on this topic for many years before he got that self same means the identical subject from Wallace, who was asking opinions from Darwin and asking for some help to get that paper published. In July 1858, Charles Lyell and J.D. Hooker, close friends of Darwin, pressed Darwin to present his conclusions so that he would not lose priority to an unknown naturalist. So Darwin had his co-workers, colleagues, or close friends, you can say, whose names are Charles Lyell and J.D. Hooker. And they tried to let Darwin, like they pressurized Darwin to publish the paper so that it is not getting published by Wallace before Darwin, and Darwin is not losing that priority before unknown naturalist, means nobody knew Wallace or nobody knew about Wallace before this. Presiding over the hastily called but now historic meeting of the Linnean Society in London, Lyell and Hooker explained to the distinguished members how these two gentlemen who were absent, Wallace was abroad and Darwin chose not to attend, had independently and unknown to one another conceived the same very ingenious theory. So, in that meeting or conference, they, like the friends of Darwin, tried to convince others that these two gentlemen, they had this conception in their mind independently. They never spoke to each other about that, and they tried to develop the same basic ideas. Both Darwin and Wallace had realized that anomalous distribution of species in particular regions had profound evolutionary significance. Subsequently, Darwin spent the rest of his days in almost total seclusion, thinking and writing mainly about the origin of species. So, both Darwin and Wallace realized the anomalous means whatever is not normal, abnormal, you can say. So, the abnormal distribution of the species in particular regions, they tried to realize that it has profound evolutionary significance. It has a big, huge evolutionary significance. Subsequently, Darwin spent rest of his life, like how Darwin tried to research more and more. He spent rest of his days in total seclusion, means he spent rest of his days alone. He tried to focus more on the writing. In contrast, Wallace applied himself to the science of biogeography, the study of the pattern and distribution of species and its significance, resulting in publication of a massive two-volume work, The Geographical Distribution of Animals, in 1876. So, as contrast to Darwin, Wallace, he published a two-volume work. F. Wallace was a gentle and modest man, so he was kind and humble, but also persistent and quietly courageous. So he was persistent, means he, if he wanted to do something, he would have done that. So that is persistence or persistent, that's the nature. And quietly courageous, he was brave. He spent years working in the most arduous possible climates. Arduous means whatever is hard, whatever is not easy to live in the context of climates and terrains, particularly in the Malay archipelago. He made patient and detailed zoological observations and collected huge number of specimens for museums and collectors, which is how he made a living. So, what did he do? He tried to collect specimens for museums, and collectors means people who collect that, and he tried to maybe sell that, or he tried to get some money. That was his kind of a project that he was up to. One result of his work was the conclusion that there is a distinct faunal boundary called the Wallace's line between an Asian realm of animals in Java, Borneo, and Philippines. I think that's Philippines, misspelled. Okay, and an Australian realm in New Guinea and Australia. So, as a result of that, there is a boundary for the fauna, that is the animals, flora and fauna. So, faunal boundary called Wallace's line, and it is said about the extent of that line where it is. In essence, this boundary posed a difficult question: how on earth did plants and animals with a clear affinity to the northern hemisphere meet with their southern hemisphere counterparts along such a distinct Malaysian demarcation zone? So this posed a question that how did the plants and animals residing in the northern hemisphere they meet, or they had interaction with the plants and animals with the southern hemisphere, something like that. Okay, and then let's move on to the next line. Wallace was uncertain about demarcation on one particular island, Celebes, a curiously shaped place that is midway between the two groups. So this island was the midpoint between the two groups that is mentioned in here, the northern and the southern hemisphere. Initially, he assigned its flora fauna to the Australian side of the line, but later he transferred it to the Asian side. Today, we know the reason for his dilemma. 200 MYA East and West Celebes were islands with their own natural history lying on opposite sides of the Tethys Ocean. They did not collide until about 15 MYA. The answer to this main question is that Wallace's line categorizes Laurasia-derived flora-fauna, the Asian and Gondwana-derived flora-fauna, the Australian. So they are giving you some time frame and when what collided. It is kind of a general fact that is being stated here, and again they are saying about the Laurasia, which is the Asian side, the Gondwana, which is the Australian side, fauna that had evolved on opposing shores on of the Tethys. The closure of the Tethys Ocean today is manifested by the ongoing collision of Australia New Guinea with Indochina, Indonesia, and the continuing closure of Mediterranean Sea as a remnant of the Western Tethys Ocean. So again, this is for the general fact that is getting stated in here. G. In his Origin of Continents and Oceans, Wegener quoted at length from Wallace's geographical distribution of animals. According to Wegener's reading, Wallace had identified three clear divisions of Australian animals, which supported his own theory of continental displacement. Wallace had shown that animals long established in southwestern Australia had an affinity with animals in South Africa, Madagascar, India, and Ceylon, but did not have an affinity with those in Asia. So, this was something that Wallace had found. He said that the animals which are the southwestern Australian animals, they were similar to the animals from Africa, Madagascar, India, and Ceylon, but they did not have anything similar with the Asian animals. Wallace also showed that Australian marsupials and monotremes are clearly related to those in South America, the Moluccas, and various Pacific islands, and that none are found in neighboring Indonesia. From this and related data, Wegener concluded that the then broadly accepted land bridge theory could not account for this distribution of animals and that only his theory of continental drift could explain it. So here Wegener tried to show that the previous theory that was there, the theory of land bridge, it could not give any explanation to the reason why this was happening, but Wegener's own theory of continental drift can explain this. H. The theory that Wegener dismissed in his own proposed that plants and animals had once migrated across now submerged intercontinental land bridges. So land bridges means the bridges which are made by land, and now submerged, they are underwater now for reasons. In 1885, one of Europe's leading geologists, Edward Suess, theorized that as the rigid earth cools, its upper crust shrinks and wrinkles like the withering skin of an aging apple. So, one of the Europe's leading geologists, like he was somebody who was renowned, and his name was Edward Swiss. He said that when Earth cools, the upper crust of the Earth shrinks, and the wrinkles that are formed is just like an old apple. He suggested that the planets, seas, and oceans now fill the wrinkles between once contiguous plateaus. So once that was continuous or contiguous, between that, the wrinkles that are formed now that is filled with water, so the water can be seas, can be oceans. I. Today, we know that we live on a dynamic earth with shifting, colliding, and separating tectonic plates. So, tectonic plates, what we were talking in the beginning. And yeah, we live on an earth which has these features of tectonic plates. It shifts, it collides. If that shift, same thing that happened with Pangaea and rest of the continents getting separated will happen. If that collides, something that happened with China and India creating the Himalayas will happen again. And separation for sure, shifting, separation, not a withering skin. And the main debate in the field of biogeography has shifted. So now they are not thinking about a withering skin that was said before, but with tectonic plates. The discussion now concerns dispersalism versus vicarianism, unrestricted radiation of species on the one hand and the development of barriers to migration on the other. Dispersion is a short-term phenomena. So they are saying that what is dispersion? Dispersion is a short-term phenomena, the daily or seasonal migration of species and their radiation to the limits of their natural environment on an extensive and continuous landmass. So that's dispersion. Vicarian evolution, however, depends upon the separation and isolation of a variety of species within the confines of natural barriers in the form of island lakes or shallow seas, topographical features that take a long time to develop. So that is basically the difference that they are giving in the last few lines of our reading. And next, if you want to practice the question, you can go ahead and practice the question. Take that time, you can pause the video and we will come back for the explanation. Now let's move on to the questions and let's check why the answers are coming like that and the explanations and the reasons. Use the information in the passage to match the people listed A to E with opinions or deeds below. Write the appropriate letters A to E in boxes 1 to 5 on your answer sheet. So, a good thing about that is you can see 5 names and 5 questions. Sometimes if you have more names than the question, it confuses you and you are like, okay, I see the name, I see they did something same, but I don't see anything that will be singling that out. But with the question like this, it is really easier for us to single that out. So the names that we have is Swiss, Wallace, Darwin and Wallace, Wagner, Lyell and Hooker. Let's check the question and see. Number 1 urged Darwin to publish his scientific findings. Without even going to the passage right now, we know it is his close friends Lyell and Hooker that we just read. And now let's go back to the passage to check that again. If we go a little bit higher, we will be seeing that in the second page itself. So this is actually the second page, and if we just check the middle part where we can see D, in July 1958, Charles Lyell and J.D. Hooker, close friends of Darwin, pressed Darwin to present his conclusions so that he would not lose priority to unknown naturalists. So that's where they are getting the option, which is E for the first question. Let's check the second one. Depicted physical feature of Earth's crust. Let's go back to the passage because we are now left with A, B, C, and D. This option is gone. Crossing that out, you are having only 4. So let's go back to the passage and try to see from where we are having this answer or this option. And they are trying to say about the physical feature of the Earth's crust. Going back to the passage, let's move to the next page and try to see if we can see anything that is fairly, or if something is convincing us that we can say, yeah, that is the answer. So it is said something about the Earth's crust, and here we read something about the crust. The theory that Wagner dismissed. So we have Wagner in here, and what else we do see here? We see Swiss. So Wagner dismissed in preference to his own proposed that plants and animals had once migrated across now submerged intercontinental land bridges in 1885, one of the Europe's leading geologists. And now let's focus. Edward Swiss theorized that as the rigid earth cools, its upper crust shrinks and wrinkles like the withering skin of an aging apple. So if we go back to the question, depicted physical feature of Earth's crust, it would be Swiss. So that would be the answer, like A would be the answer for 2. 3. Believed in continental drift theory while rejecting another one. So we read that somewhere while going through the same page. Let's go back to the same page and try to find where did we read that. Here I can see continental drift theory, and the question is believed in continental drift theory while rejecting land bridge. Maybe the other one. So let's go back. Yeah, land bridge. And now if we just go through the lines and see who did that, it will be obvious. So Wegener concluded that the then broadly accepted land bridge theory could not account, so rejecting, could not account for this distribution of animals, and that only his theory of continental drift would explain it. So for that reason, if you are going to the question, for number 3, it would be Wegener, that is the option D. And we just saw the passage why it is option D. Next, let's see question number 4. Question number 4. Published works about wildlife distribution in different region. And let's check who did that. If we go back to the question and if we just go like to this para in E, let's read what the para says. Both Darwin and Wallace had realized that the anomalous distribution of species in particular regions had profound evolutionary significance. Okay, and next see what else that it says. Subsequently, Darwin spent the rest of his days in almost total seclusion, thinking and writing mainly about the origin of species. So, this is what Darwin did. And what is our question though? Published works about wildlife distribution in different regions, something about biogeographic. Wildlife, region, biogeographic for sure. So, let's go back. In contrast, now focus. Wallace applied himself to the science of biogeography, the study of the pattern and distribution of species and its significance, resulting in the publication of a massive two-volume work, The Geographical Distribution of Animals, in 1876. So, for that reason, it will be B, Wallace, as the answer for 4. And now for 5, we have only one option left, which is C. So we know that it would be C, but we have to check the reason and have to see why. So evolution of species is based on selection by nature. Answer is C, Darwin and Wallace. And let's check why it is so. And for checking the answer, let's go back to the passage and see where we are exactly getting that option, because the option is both for them. And the question is, evolution of species is based on selection by nature. We read that in the first few lines while we are focusing, when we read that this is something that both of them have done. It was done independently. So let's try to search where we found that. So if we check the D para, focus more on the D para, and then what are the last few lines of D para is saying, and then jump to E. The last few lines is saying Wallace was abroad and Darwin chose not to attend, had independently and unknown to each other conceived the same very ingenious theory. Both Darwin and Wallace had realized that the anomalous distribution of species in a particular regions and profound evolutionary significance. So for that reason, question 5 will be the option C. Now next we have questions 6 to 8 to focus on. For the next set of questions, let's read 6 to 8. The reading passage has 9 paragraphs, A to I. Which paragraph contains the following information? Write the correct letter A to I in boxes 6 to 8 in your answer sheet. So for this, we have to mention which paragraph is saying something about this specific question. And let's check what is question 6. Best adaptable animal survived on the planet. So we have read about this line in the starting of our reading, as far as I remember. Let's go back to the passage and see if we can find anything in the starting paras. So the first para was saying more and more about the formation and animals, and second para was trying to say why some are living, why some are dying. Our question was adaptable animal, like best adaptable animal, and it was the B para which was saying something like that some of them are thriving, who are escaping, who is strongest, who is swiftest, and in the end of that B para, we were also seeing like a few lines that said, because in every generation the inferior would inevitably be killed off, and now best is superior. Superior would remain, that is, the fittest would survive. So that is the reason why question 6 will be having the option B, because it is having the answer in the B para. 7. Boundary called Wallace's Line, found between Asia and Australia, and we have read that just in our passages. Let's check where we did read that. If we go back to the reading and scroll a bit down till I can see Australia. Whenever you are seeing a bunch of names, just keep an eye close with that, and we can go up and down with the names of the country because we need Asia, and also we need we need Asia and Australia. So let's check this area. We are having the names, and we also need the name that is Wallace's line. So let's see if we are seeing anything similar to Wallace's line in here or no. If we go a bit higher, do we see anything like Asia, Australia? I can see Asia, Australia. Okay, I can see Wallace's line too. So this is how you're just checking the lines and the words at a glance. During that 60 minutes, or individually if you're concentrating, so it's 20 minutes, you don't have that whole bunch of time to focus on a single question. So this is how you skim, and checking that by the words, checking that by the keywords, that's the most important thing. Yeah, you are having Australia and Asia in most of the reading, but where are you having that? That's the most important point. If you're checking Australia, Asia, and seeing something about Wallace, just stick to that part and try to focus on that part only, rather than going with all the passage, like all over the passage over and over, because human beings, they try to forget when they are learning or reading something new. So we will forget exactly where it was there if we first try to focus on reading. So here we can see Wallace's line written, and for that particular reason, for the question that we are having on our end, will be in the para F. So 7 will be F. Now 8. Animal relevance exists between Australia and Africa. So Australia, Africa is the next words that we need to see, and checking where we are having Australia and Africa, and then animal or something about animal relevance would be like a hint. So here, if we try to see what did we saw here, it was Australia, Asia, and let's see if there is anything about Africa. I don't see here about Africa, and to be honest, I'm just trying to skip all the meaning, just trying to focus on the words. I don't see Africa as far as I saw. If you see Africa, just mention in the comment, because that would be a freebie for me for the next time we are checking this reading. Now, next, if we go a little bit down, I can see South Africa in here. So we got a spot where there is South Africa and there is Australia. Let's check the question. And what was the question? Animal relevance exists between Australia and Africa. So let's check the reading where we can see anything about relevance or anything like that. Going back, let's go in the G para because G is having all the information over there. So in the G para, if we try to see, Wallace had shown that animals long established in southwestern Australia had an affinity with animals in South Africa, Madagascar, India, and Ceylon, but did not have an affinity with those in Asia. So if we try to check the question, relevance, affinity, that's the same like the synonym that they are trying to use. And for that reason, the answer we are finding is in the para G. So yeah, we are just focusing on the keywords. And that's the tip in the examination. Also try to focus more on the keywords because lack of time. If you try to focus on the paragraphs while reading, going through them, you might be skipping some questions at the end because you won't get that time. It is true, and yeah, that's the reason it is not that happy kind of word, but the feeling that you will get if you skip questions is not happy either. So it's better to skim and skip while you're practicing, or while you are even like appearing for the exam. It's better to follow that approach. Let's move on the next and the last set of questions for the video that we're making today. Okay, so questions 9 to 13. Summary. Complete the following summary of the paragraphs of reading passage using no more than 2 words instructions. Yep, no more than 2 words. From the reading passage for each answer, write your answers in the boxes 9 to 13 on your answer sheet. And now for this, they're giving you the keyword land bridge, and we know where we found land bridge. So we would be trying to check that part and check if there is something like a hint that is given so that we can follow up with the lines and get the answers. So Wegener found that continental drift instead of land bridge theory could explain strange species distribution phenomena. Let's go to our passage. Try to see the land bridge part and try to mark that whenever you're in the exam. Try to mark that down. So I can see intercontinental land bridges. That is with Wegener's name. Let's go back. So Wegener found that continental drift instead of land bridge theory could explain certain strange species distribution phenomenon. In this theory, vegetation and wildlife dash intercontinentally. So we have to check about the vegetation and wildlife, and we have to try and figure out what can be the answer. So let's go back to the passage and see. Wegener dismissed in preference to his own proposed that plants and animals. So in the question, what we had in the question, we had wildlife and vegetation. Wildlife is animals, vegetation plants. Had once migrated across now submerged intercontinental land bridges. So for the first option or the answer, it would be migrated. For answer, I guess 9. Yeah, answer 9 would be migrated, because we are finding that word intercontinentally is there. Only vegetation, wildlife is getting that synonyms. Next, however, Ejudad Swiss compared the wrinkle of crust to dash of an old apple. He said aging of an old apple, if I remember well, and he said something about withering skin. So if we try to go back to the passage, and there we find Ejudad Swiss theorized that as the rigid earth cools, its upper crust shrinks and wrinkles like the withering skin of an aging apple. So let's go back. Wrinkle of crust to dash of an old apple. Old is aging. Wrinkle, we are getting that. So it would be wrinkles like the withering. Withering would be the answer for question 10. Now it is well known that we are living on the planet where there are dash in constant mobile states or mobile states instead of what Swiss described. So here he is giving like a comparison or a contrast that what Swiss describes, this is different, and we read about that somewhere after this H para in I somewhere we read. Today we know that we live in a dynamic earth with shifting, colliding and separating tectonic plates, not a withering skin, and the main debate in the field of biogeography has shifted. So we are getting that option, and what is tectonic plates is the option, because they are talking about shifting, colliding and separating. Everything happening for what? Like it is happening to the tectonic plates. So for that, the answer for 11 would be either tectonic you can mention, or you can mention plates or tectonic, sorry, even tectonic plates or plates. Like alone plates you can mention, or tectonic plates. Okay, let's see that. Hotspot in biogeography are switched to concerns between two terms, this and this, and we remember we had those words at the end of the passage. The discussion now concerns, so the main debate of the biogeography has shifted, and the discussion now is concerning or is revolving around the dispersalism, like dispersion or dispersalism, and vicarianism. So, vicarian or vicarianism, and for that reason, the answer looks so obvious because you know that there are these terms at the end of the reading where you are following the lines, getting all the answers, and if you see something like in double quotes, you know that they kinda in double quotes, like in here, if we see they are in double quotes. So it has been asked as is, which is again a tip for the examination. If you see something in double quotes, you can go back to the passage and see or find what is in double quotes. So this was the reading explanation for the first set of questions. And if you liked my video, please do subscribe to my channel and share the video. The more you share, the more views I get. I will try to make more new topics and come up with them so that it will help you in the examination. Till we meet again, all the best for your examination if you're taking one.